Welcome back to Top 5.
Jure Grando 1578 to 1656. Jure Grando, often referred to as Jure Grando, holds a significant yet eerie place in the annals of vampire lore as one of the earliest documented cases of a real-life vampire. Born in 1578 in the small village of Kringa, located in the Istrian region of what is now modern-day Croatia, Jure was a stonemason by trade, living a seemingly normal life with his wife, Ivana, and their two children, Anna and Nikola. Upon his death in 1656, due to what was attributed to illness, the story of Jure Grando took a terrifying turn. Local legends suggest that he did not rest in peace. Instead, he allegedly returned from the grave to haunt his village as a vampire, known locally as a strigan, a term that encompasses notions of both vampirism and sorcery. For 16 years following his death, villagers reported seeing him rise from his grave at night, knocking on doors and instilling fear in the hearts of the townsfolk. It was said that each time he knocked on a door, someone from that household would die within days. The fear surrounding Grando grew when his widow, Ivana, claimed to have seen him in her bedroom, describing a scene that would chill even the bravest of hearts. She recounted how his corpse appeared to be smiling and gasping for breath, and he would sexually assault her in her own home, a horrifying act that only served to deepen the villagers' dread and belief that he was indeed a vampire. Desperate to rid themselves of this nocturnal terror, the village priest, Father Giorgio, led the charge against Grando. He confronted the vampire with a crucifix, proclaiming, "Behold Jesus Christ, you vampire! Stop tormenting us!" Despite their efforts, initial attempts to pierce Grando's heart with a hawthorn stick failed when it simply bounced off his seemingly unyielding flesh. Eventually, a group of 9 brave villagers decided to unearth Grando's coffin. Upon opening it, they found a remarkably preserved corpse, with a smile still etched on its face, a sight that sent shivers down their spines. Realizing that traditional methods of exorcism were futile, Father Giorgio and the villagers resorted to more drastic measures. They decapitated Grando with a saw, and as soon as the saw tore through his skin, he allegedly screamed, and blood flowed from the wound. This gruesome act is said to have finally brought peace to the frightened village. Jure Grando's story is one of fear, superstition, and the lengths to which people will go to rid themselves of what they perceive as evil. His legend has persisted through the ages, serving as an early example of the vampire mythos that would later captivate the world. Mercy Brown, a young woman from Exeter, Rhode Island, has become a central figure in American vampire folklore, rivaling even the famed Count Dracula in notoriety. Born in 1872, Mercy was the daughter of George Brown, a farmer who faced the tragic loss of several family members to tuberculosis in the late 1800s. In a time when the understanding of disease was rudimentary at best, the community looked for supernatural explanations for their misfortunes. In 1892, after the deaths of her mother and brother due to the same illness, Mercy herself fell ill. Despite the family's efforts, she succumbed to tuberculosis at the age of 20. Her death was not the end of her story, however. The Brown family became a target of local superstition, with townsfolk accusing Mercy of being a vampire responsible for the deaths of her family. In an effort to combat the spreading fear, the local community exhumed the bodies of the deceased family members, including Mercy's. During the exhumation, they discovered something peculiar. Mercy's body showed little sign of decay, which was not entirely surprising since she had been buried in an above-ground vault during a harsh New England winter. This anomaly was enough for the superstitious townsfolk to label her a vampire. In a gruesome twist of fate, the townspeople decided that Mercy's heart was the source of her family's suffering. They cut it out, burned it, and fed the ashes to her sick brother, Edgar, in a desperate attempt to cure him. Tragically, Edgar died shortly after this macabre ritual, further solidifying Mercy's posthumous reputation as a vampire in the eyes of the community. The story of Mercy Brown is not just a tale of a young woman's death, it reflects the deep-rooted fears and misconceptions surrounding illness and death during a time of limited medical knowledge. Her legacy has become emblematic of the vampire lore that developed in America, highlighting the intersection of superstition and tragedy in the face of untimely death. Fritz Haarmann, often referred to as the Butcher of Hanover, the Vampire of Hanover, and the Wolf Man, stands as the most notorious real-life vampire in history. Born on October 25, 1879, in Hanover, Germany, Haarmann's life would spiral into darkness and depravity, leaving a legacy of horror that continues to fascinate true crime enthusiasts today. Haarmann grew up in a troubled household as the youngest of 6 children. His father was a strict authoritarian, while his mother was known to be overly indulgent towards him. This complex family dynamic likely influenced Haarmann's later behavior. From a young age, he exhibited signs of instability, failing to form normal relationships with his peers. Instead, he was drawn to feminine activities, developing interests in cooking and sewing, which further isolated him from traditional masculine roles. As a young man, Haarmann struggled to find stable employment and was known for committing petty crimes. His early criminal activity included theft and sexual offenses against young boys, which led to his first arrest in 1896. After a series of legal troubles, he was diagnosed with mental health issues and spent time in a mental institution. Despite this, Haarmann managed to escape and return to Hanover, where he would soon embark on a much darker path. By the end of World War I, Germany was rife with social and economic turmoil, creating a breeding ground for crime. The aftermath of the war saw a rise in homelessness and poverty, which Haarmann exploited. He began to lure young men and boys, many of whom were runaways or in desperate situations, into his home with promises of food, shelter, or work. However, once inside, these young victims would often meet a horrific fate. Haarmann's method of murder was particularly gruesome and chilling. He would typically bite into the throats of his victims, which not only caused fatal injuries but also left a lasting mark of horror that earned him the nickname Vampire of Hanover. This act of violence was often intertwined with sexual assault, as Haarmann would engage in sadistic practices before ultimately killing his victims. His preferred method of disposal was dismemberment, with many of the remains discarded in the Lane River. The sheer brutality of his actions shocked the nation and contributed to the vampire imagery associated with him. The extent of Haarmann's crimes was staggering. He is believed to have murdered at least 24 young men and boys, but the true number could be much higher, with some estimates suggesting that he could have killed as many as 70 individuals. Many of his victims were never formally identified, lost to history in the wake of their tragic fates. Haarmann often kept personal belongings from his victims, which he would sometimes give away as gifts, further demonstrating his cold detachment from the human lives he had ended. Haarmann's arrest came in June 1924, following a series of discoveries by the police that connected him to the disappearances of several young boys in Hanover. The investigation began when the remains of a young man were found in the Lane River, sparking concern among local authorities. As police delved deeper, they uncovered a pattern of missing persons that all led back to Haarmann. When detectives raided his apartment, they were met with a chilling scene. The walls and floors were stained with blood, and various personal items belonging to missing youths were found strewn throughout the space. During questioning, Haarmann initially attempted to downplay his involvement, claiming that he had only engaged in consensual sexual activities with the boys. However, faced with the overwhelming evidence against him, he eventually confessed to the murders, providing gruesome details that would haunt investigators for years. Haarmann's confession revealed the depths of his depravity. He described how he would lure his victims with promises of food and safety, only to turn on them in a violent rage. He recounted how he would bite into their throats, often as a means of both killing and satisfying his sexual desires. His confessions were characterized by a chilling nonchalance, as he spoke of his actions as if recounting a mundane event rather than horrific crimes. The trial of Fritz Haarmann began in December 1924 and quickly became a sensational media event that captivated the public. The courtroom was filled with onlookers eager to witness the proceedings of what was dubbed the most revolting case in German criminal history. The trial brought to light the gruesome nature of Haarmann's crimes, with graphic details that left many in shock. He was charged with 27 counts of murder but confessed to only 14, insisting that many of the killings were committed in a state of uncontrolled passion. Throughout the trial, Haarmann maintained that he did not plan his murders. Instead, he claimed that they were impulsive acts driven by a compulsion he could not control. This defense strategy sparked debates about the nature of evil, mental illness, and accountability. The public reaction was a mixture of horror and fascination as they grappled with the reality of such a monster living among them. On December 19, 1924, the court found Haarmann guilty of 24 counts of murder, and he was sentenced to death by guillotine. He displayed a strange sense of acceptance regarding his fate, stating, "I am guilty, gentlemen, but I want to die as a man." His execution took place on April 15, 1925, and despite the gruesome nature of his crimes, he faced his end with a calm demeanor. His last words before the guillotine were a haunting testament to his twisted psyche: "I repent, but I do not fear death." The legacy of Fritz Haarmann endures, not only as a symbol of the darkest depths of human depravity, but also as a reflection of societal fears surrounding crime, sexuality, and mental illness. His story has inspired countless works of fiction and true crime investigations, solidifying his status as history's most infamous real-life vampire. The chilling combination of his sadistic nature and the vampiric imagery associated with his crimes continues to captivate and horrify audiences, ensuring that Haarmann's dark legacy will not be forgotten anytime soon.